on Indianapolis this week, putting Hoosier hospitality on the line. The governor closes Indiana to new Syrian refugees as Congress looks to pause the program. Is it the right thing to do? A Sunday exclusive. Raphael sits down one-on-one with the man in charge of the Indianapolis FBI office. And our first look at the proposed changes to Indiana's civil rights law to protect the LGBT community and why no one seems to be happy with it.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Raphael Sanchez.
Thank you for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. I'm Katie Hines. Raphael will join us a bit later. You can join us right now on Twitter by following our official account at Indy This Week. We start today by talking about the emotional debate over blocking Syrian refugees from Indiana. Enormous reaction this week from both sides after Governor Mike Pence announced Monday that Indiana would stop its resettlement program for Syrian refugees. The governor repeatedly citing comments by the FBI director that there are gaps in intelligence about the refugees, implying that ISIS members could use the program to come to the United States.
As governor, I have no higher obligation than the safety and security of the people of our state. And I believe this was an appropriate step for us to take, none of which takes away from the fact that the state of Indiana, like every state represented here, has a long tradition of opening our arms and our homes and our charities to refugees. And that tradition continues to this very hour in the state of Indiana.
Governor Pence on Friday joining the governors of 26 other states, asking President Obama to immediately suspend the relocation of Syrian refugees to the United States. In that letter, the governors asked that the program not be restarted until an exhaustive review of security measures is complete and necessary changes have been implemented. That same movement is now making its way to Congress, with lawmakers considering suspending the entire Syrian refugee program. Democrat Senator Joe Donnelly tells RTV6 in an interview that he does support pausing the program.
Well, I do. I have said that. I think that it should be paused until we have the vetting process completely in place, that we understand what it is. This is not an effort to try to be cruel to any group of people. This is to make sure our own citizens are safe.
The U.S. House voted Thursday to pause the program with Indiana's vote straight down party lines. Democrat Andre Carson joins our Jason Fechner.
Congressman Andre Carson, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thanks for having us again.
Great to see you. The House this week passing a measure with the support of 47 Democrats to suspend the refugee program from both Syria and Iraq right now. You voted against it.
Sure.
Why?
Well, for me, our founding fathers were brilliant in that one of the first clauses of the Constitution was there shall not be the establishment of a religion. And I think that this is a religious test, effectively, and I think it speaks to a growing sentiment of xenophobia and anti-immigrant sentiment and an Islamophobic sentiment. Greater than that, the requirements for refugees to come into our country are already pretty vigorous. It takes 18 to 24 months. There are at least 13 different steps. You have reviews by the FBI, Homeland Security, the State Department, and even local law enforcement. And I think it's important that we don't use this as an opportunity for elected officials to gain points or to raise their national profiles by speaking out against all that is great about our country, and that's the fact that we're built on the backs of immigrants.
Ahead of that vote and the debate in Washington, your reaction to Governor Pence's move to essentially do the same thing on the state level here?
Well, I strongly disagree with the governor's view. I understand that there's a sense as the governor, as the CEO of the state, to want to keep citizens safe. However, that sentiment, I feel, is improper if we're impulsively issuing this. Now, the fact of the matter is that these folks can come to the state as they wish. They just can't receive the benefits from FSSA and other groups. Here's the reality. You have refugees coming to our country who are escaping the very destructive mentality that we're fighting, and that's ISIL or Daesh. You have folks who are working with the underground market and traffickers. Some young women are being abused and raped and sold off as sex slaves. You have families who are being broken up, who are being killed. And you have some folks saying that the migrants who are coming here, refugees who are coming here, can only be Christian. That is un-American. And I was disappointed to see what Governor Pence did. He's a friend of mine. We work together in Congress, but we have different views on this. And I think that anyone who wants to be a CEO of a state or even a country has to understand that we're built on the backs of immigrants, not just Christian immigrants, not just Jewish immigrants, not just Muslim immigrants, but immigrants.
You, of course, serve on the House Armed Services Committee this week. Former ambassador to Iraq and Afghanistan Ryan Crocker testified that there needs to be more military presence from the U.S. overseas right now in both Syria and Iraq, along with more airstrikes. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's clear that Russia is increasing her footprint. It's also clear that we need the support from our friends in the Arab League. Many Arab League nations have sealed off their borders, though they've offered nominal support in terms of helping with the refugee crisis. America can't do it alone. We cannot be the world's police, but in effect, we are the world's police. We're the mightiest military force in recorded history. We're the wealthiest nation in recorded history. But we have to look at intelligence sharing efforts. We have to look at the fact that those folks who are coming here, those folks who are already here, want to make valuable contributions to our country. The fact of the matter is that, be they Latino community, Arab community, South Asian community, African community, some of these folks are coming to our country and they're starting their own businesses and they're putting Americans back to work. They're contributing to our lower unemployment numbers as we speak. I think our military presence overseas has to be reviewed regularly, and the greater internal controls that we have, the more that we can see that we're not wasting taxpayer dollars.
You are one of two Muslims serving on Congress right now. Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump had referenced the potential of a Muslim database in the U.S. Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush had talked about some sort of the potential for a religious test. How can the Muslim community in the United States, especially right now, convince people that they are not tied to terror in this way?
We can learn from a great example from our Jewish brothers and sisters. We can learn from other groups. You know, when the Ku Klux Klan proclaimed to represent Christianity, and they were bombing churches, killing young black girls, when they were lynching African Americans, when they were killing African Americans, no rational person thought that it was sane to recommend that we close all churches or hold a religious test for those who proclaim to be Christian. The same applies here. The ISIL or Daesh folks are claiming to represent Islam, and they don't represent Islam. It is a death cult. It is a terrorist organization. It is a criminal organization that uses the language of religion to further its wicked agenda.
Congressman Andre Carson, thank you for being here. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family as well. Good luck not overeating.
God bless.
I'll beat you to the end.
My man.
Back to you.
When we come back, safety and security in the U.S. after the attacks in Paris. We go one-on-one with the man in charge of the Indianapolis FBI office. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. As we turn to security in the United States, the questions swirling about the possible threats here after the ISIS attack in Paris. Our Rafael Sanchez sat down with the agent in charge of the FBI office in Indianapolis.
Special Agent in Charge, Jay Abbott, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Your boss, Director Comey, fears copycats in light of what we've seen in France and in Mali. Do you share the same concerns?
Yes, I do. We've received no credible information that would indicate a threat from the terrorist attack that we've seen occur in Paris. But the one thing we fear the most is that homegrown violent extremist or misguided type person who determines, based on what they've seen, to copycat that incident or try to act out on their own by being inspired by that incident. And that's the one thing that probably the most that we worry about.
We're told that those folks called the lone wolf syndrome, right?
Right.
Are hard to detect. So do we have any of those folks or any credible people under surveillance?
Yes, and across the nation, we have a number that we keep an eye on when we have evidence to do so. And given the events that have occurred in Paris, we've intensified our scrutiny and our surveillance on those subjects that we consider to be of the highest risk. And we have a prioritization type of procedure process that we go through to determine which of those that we need to give good scrutiny to. And I can tell you that since the attacks in Paris, as a precaution, we've increased our scrutiny.
ISIS keeps making threats against Washington. But if I live in Logansport or Greenwood or Bloomington or Avon or Fishers, am I safe?
I love that question. It's a great question. And for those Hoosiers that are out there, this is what I would say to them. The FBI, with its law enforcement partners, local, state, across the state, we collaborate frequently. In fact, in another week, we'll be having our regularly scheduled Joint Terrorism Task Force Executive Board meeting where we discuss those threats that potentially we face around the entire state, and from small communities to mid-sized communities to large communities. Now, we don't just wait for those meetings to occur to discuss those things. We have a regular message that goes out to chiefs of police and other persons that are part of our JTTF, which is pretty much a representation across the entire state. Any information that potentially could be pertinent or threat-oriented, they're receiving right away. And I get daily situational rep briefings on the conditions internationally, particularly as they're unfolding in Paris right now, and what it might mean for us. And so far, again, nothing credible has come to the surface that would indicate a threat to our homeland.
Based on those briefings that you do receive, do you feel confident about the way you and your local stakeholders and state stakeholders are dealing with the current security situation as it exists? It changes every day, so right?
Absolutely.
A Monday is much different than a Sunday, but
right.
Are you confident at least that you have the tools in place and the resources that you could respond if you needed to?
Yes, I am. Now, no amount of preparation will ever reduce to zero the amount of risk, a degree of risk that we may face. But we are well postured, and I point to a number of the things that we've done together locally here in the state of Indiana. Most importantly, probably the exercise that we went through a year ago at Greenwood, where we went through a huge national exercise located at the old mall in Greenwood, where we simulated a complex active shooter mall type attack. And there were over 800 participants involved with that, representing law enforcement, social services, emergency services, fire services, everything, in order to practice for just that type of an event that we've seen unfold in Paris. So I feel like we're very well situated for it. And the one comment I would make is that we can never promise complete zero risk, but we remain ever vigilant and we feel prepared for any type of contingency.
The country of France is still in mourning. We saw those terrorist attack last week. You have a connection to Paris.
Yes, sir.
You served there at the U.S. Embassy in Paris. What have we learned in this short week from those terrorist attacks in France?
Well, there's a lot of information, I think, that we'll begin to glean intelligence more and more as time goes by. But the one thing I think is the most concerning is that this particular ISIS or ISIL inspired attack had organization. And we've been experiencing flash to bang, very a small scale. But this had some planning, quite a degree of organization and planning, and that's a little bit concerning, as well as the concern that there may be others plots out there still in the planning stages to do similar attacks in Europe. Appears to be the highest risk, but we're watching that constantly, and we have extremely good collaboration with our European partners so that we can stay on top of it to help them with their current threat right now, but also to help ourselves to get whatever intelligence we might be able to glean to increase the security of our own homeland and our citizens.
Mr. Abbott, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Please come back again.
Thank you. I'd be happy to.
Well, let us come back again to you. Thank you for listening to your office. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, sir.
A new proposal is what one party calls a balance between ensuring civil rights for LGBT individuals and protecting freedom of religion. But will it get the support needed to pass at the State House? You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week as we turn to the fight at the State House over LGBT rights and religious freedom. Senate Republicans unveiled their proposal this week aimed at balancing the two, but the bill is drawing criticism from both religious conservatives and gay rights activists. It expands the state's civil rights laws to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, while carving out exemptions for religious leaders and organizations. Neither the House Speaker nor the governor is pledging support for the measure at this point. And Democrats continue to push for what they call a simple solution of adding 4 words and a comma into the laws.
When those folks see this, they'll see if they're for religious liberty, we've got a great carve-out for religious liberty. If it's for extending rights to the LGBT community, they have reached that goal as well.
We shouldn't be bullied into a decision here. We need to put the interests of Hoosiers first, not out-of-state interest groups, regardless of which side they're on.
The citizens of this state and other states and businesses inside and outside of Indiana are watching to see what we do. And they want to know, will there be across-the-board protection?
Let's welcome in our political insiders now, Mary Beth Schneider, Laura Beck, and Pete Seat. Do you think this plan can pass?
Not as written, no. There are too many people against it. They always say that if you have both sides opposed to something, you've probably hit a good medium. I think this is the exception that proves the rule. I don't think it will satisfy enough people to get through.
Well, I think one of the challenges facing Indiana, and particularly facing the governor in light of just his recent poll numbers that came out, is that we're still talking about RFRA. We're still talking about this issue, and every time we talk about it, we are reminded of what happened last year, earlier this year, as we were going through this just incredibly divisive bill. And so I don't know if this will be enough of a fix. I don't know if it's going to make people happy. It certainly has the potential to dilute human rights ordinances in municipalities, which can cause some problems. So I think we're going to have to wait and see what happens.
To echo what Mary Beth said, I think, yeah, the art of political compromise in this environment is both sides being equally angry. But I think with this bill, time is of the essence. The quicker they get it through, the better. Then they can move on to transportation, infrastructure, and all these other very weighty issues in the short session.
Absolutely.
Will we see a divisive debate like RFRA earlier this spring?
I don't think it'll be quite as bad as that. I don't think it'll be a national debate.
I think the potential is always there, though, for some type of divisive debate. I think the very nature of this bill divides people. And so, and the very nature of this conversation divides people. So I think it's hard to separate emotions from this. And I think because we were on the national stage, we will continue to be looked at with this issue as well.
And that's, again, why timing is key. The longer they stir the pot, the worse it gets, the more protests there are. Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Moving on to Syria, is the decision to pause the resettlement program justified, or is it mass hysteria at this point?
I think it's justified. We need to pause it at this point. You listen to the FBI director who says that this is not a perfect system we have for vetting, that there are holes, there are flaws. But, you know, a friend of mine said this on Facebook the other day. She said, I envy anyone who has strong opinions on this on either side of the debate. It's very difficult. You know, I'm the son of 2 immigrants. I feel very strongly that we should be a welcoming place, that refugees who are trying to get away from these hot spots around the world should have, they should see open arms in the United States. But at the same time, national security is extremely important, even more so than it ever has been. And there are people with ill intentions who want to come to the United States. And I'm okay with a pause if that means we get this system right so that we can welcome these people and feel protected.
I do think it's mass hysteria, and I think that a genuine fear is being used with the wrong solution. ISIS is smart. They are not going to put somebody on a waiting list again in the United States as a refugee when they can just come in right now on a tourist visa or a student visa. They can come as a businessman, and they don't need to get into this system. And frankly, is anybody stopping French and Belgian citizens? Those were the people that were their passports that had the attacks in Paris. And so I just think that while I understand the fear, this is the wrong way to address it, and it's a betrayal, I think, of what America stands for.
Will the decision have lingering effects on Governor Pence going into the election?
Well, there's always the potential when you're the governor that any decision you can make can have a lingering impact. I think the challenge that Governor Pence is going to face is that I do think Hoosiers are going to want to know what information he had to make this decision, because there have been, I believe, 2 families that were turned away from coming here who had followed the process correctly. The other challenge is that it is an election year for him, and that the Republican Governors Association is taking a very active active role in his campaign. So was this the result of some type of coordinated effort among Republican governors candidates because they all came out at the same time and did this? We don't know. So I think the one way that he could probably really reassure people is to step off the national stage of doing all these interviews and really focus locally on, here's the information I had, here's why I did it. And I think if you can give an explanation like that, it makes your argument stronger.
I'd like to add, it's going to help him, frankly. This will help his base. Polls show that actually people do like this. That's why I think it is kind of a mass hysteria. And frankly, you have Democrats backing it too, including Senator Joe Donnelly of Indiana.
Well, I was going to say Hoosiers, watch national television shows too, and the governor has
spends a lot of time nationally.
The governor has written a statewide op-ed that has been published in multiple outlets explaining why he made this decision. And you don't make a decision like this and then start having exceptions. Having a pause is a prudent thing to do.
We are out of time. Thank you all so much for your thoughts on this.
Thanks.
Thanks, Katie.